This debate, people, David Wood versus Muhammad Hijab. I don't know if you guys have watched this debate. If you haven't watched it, I think you should watch it because it is, in my understanding, a monumental debate. It will definitely go down as a key kind of debate that took place. That's my understanding. I don't know. I do think it's definitely worth watching. It is quite lengthy. It is, I think, just under 3 hours. Now, but you can watch it in parts. I did go through the whole thing. It's very entertaining to watch. Now, right, David Wood. Do you guys know anything about him, by the way? Do you know anything about...
His father.
Say that.
He tried to kill his father.
He tried to kill his father? Did he try to kill his father? His father tried to kill him. There's just plot twist after plot twist here. So okay, shall we get one version?
No, his father tried to kill their mother.
No, that was the neighbor.
Is David Wood that converting Nabil Qureshi into a Christian?
I don't know. It could be that because he's definitely he's like one of these kind of evangelic kind of Christians who goes out. He does a lot of preaching, but a lot of his da'wah, if we can use the term da'wah, is quite Islamophobic, and it is very anti-Islam. So he does kind of take the mick out of Islam quite a bit. I haven't actually watched too many of his things, to be honest with you. I think I've maybe just a few clips. That's all I've seen. But he has had many debates with people like Dr. Shabir Ali. He's debated other Muslims, many Muslims. They are on, the debates are on YouTube, and he has his kind of channel with a large number of followers, to be fair. So this debate was on Tawheed versus the Trinity. So what are my thoughts on it? The debate, I think those of you that haven't watched it, it's very clear that Muhammad Hijab won that debate, hands down. And there's no two ways about that. And I'd like to go through some of that points, but then I want to discuss my thoughts on some of the kind of what was being debated as well. So the topic that they chose, Tawheed versus the Trinity. To be fair, one of them is reason-based. That is Tawheed, the oneness of God, is quite, it's very much, not quite, it is very much in line with reason. The Trinity by default is what the Christians call, and what they call irrational truths or illogical truths. Truths that don't make sense. So from the offset, whenever you're debating something that where one side appeals to reason and the other doesn't, the reason side will always make sense and prevail, generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, because that is what appeals to people, the voice of reason. Now, so I could say in some ways one could argue that, you know, Muhammad Hijab would have had the upper hand from the word go, because the debate was already kind of destined to win, almost, because the topic gives you the upper hand. You could argue that. But to be fair, I was very impressed with Muhammad Hijab's research. You know, to be very clear on that, he must have spent an incredible amount of time researching the biblical sources, researching and just developing a knowledge of the Bible. I was much impressed, I must say. I didn't expect that really him to be coming out quoting the Bible time after time, and on many occasions impromptu, like in the Q&A. I mean, one could say, well, okay, for the dedicated speech, maybe these things are rehearsed, but for the spontaneous Q&A to be, you know, quoting verses of the Bible with references on each account is something very impressive. It demonstrates an in-depth knowledge of the Bible. The way other scholars, the background of the Trinity, I think that was very well researched by Muhammad Hijab. So it wasn't just the voice of having the voice of reason, the fact that he was very well prepared, I've got to say that. I haven't watched much of David Wood before. What I've heard is he is usually quite well prepared. This is what I've heard from people, the comments and other things. He didn't seem to be very well prepared for this debate, so I don't know what that was. Those of you that have seen it, he did come off a bit, I don't know, like he came off a bit shaky and things like this on certain accounts, and he was saying things that embarrassing himself. To be fair, he did say a few things which you'd think, why would he? There was a point where he said, he was asked a question and he said there's a lengthy reply which I don't actually think is correct, and people started laughing because that was in defense of Christianity. He mentioned that. So these kind of things showed that, well, he didn't really seem to be so well prepared for this. I don't know whether he was prepared or not, but he didn't appear to be. That's one thing. The other thing is that, right? By the way, I mean, I'm taking. Oh, I mean, I've asked a few of you have watched this anyway, because I'm as a given that a lot of you have watched the debate. The way it was debated, the whole topic didn't really lean in on reason at all. Much. I mean, there were some points that Muhammad Hijab did say, given the fact that the whole thing could have been won by reason alone, really, because 1 makes sense and 3 is 1 doesn't make sense. That said, apart from a few points, Muhammad Hijab doesn't generally lean in on reason much. His point was that, look, this creed was formulated by the Nicene Council in whatever 325 or whenever they were, and can you give me any Christian sources that believed in the Trinity? And he highlights some points, some factors that are necessary. He says that they coexist. The Trinity are co-equal, coexisting, and independent kind of Godheads. Independent persons of this Godhead. So he says that is the creed of the Trinity, and I want you to show me that for 300 years any Christian that believed it in that manner. He says that people did believe in it, but they believed in it differently, like maybe there was a hierarchy or there were other kind of beliefs, and some didn't believe in the Trinity. But show me this creed from your books prior to the Council of Nicaea. That was the main thing, and I think that was very well done, very well researched by Muhammad Hijab, and credit where credit is due. Even though on a lot of points, to be fair, outside of this debate, I disagree on several topics with Muhammad Hijab, but I think the way he handled this from a knowledge perspective, that's what I'm speaking about right now, the way he handled this debate, with the points being very clear on the factors, that can you show this, the Council of Nicaea kind of constructed this, can you show a similar creed from the early, any of the early sources, was precise, it was to the point, and Dr. Wood just failed to answer that. He does try to answer it in his own way. He tries to say things like, look, well, we don't need to say that because we believe, they believed that Jesus was God, and they believed that the Holy Spirit was God, so why do we need to find these kind of keywords? But he doesn't sufficiently answer it, to be fair. So I think that was it was quite tactile. The way it was done was good. There was just, this is leaning in on some of the pros, the positive things that Muhammad Hijab had really done well. Targeted, made it concise, quoted just Christian sources all the way. And yeah, so I think that was really good. Just trying to think of some points coming to right now. He did mainly in several of the kind of comebacks that David Wood has. Muhammad Hijab does answer them. He answers many, right, but he doesn't answer them all. And this is some of the, if we can flip the coin to some of the other, like if we're going to now look at David Wood, let's just for a moment reflect on him. He doesn't generally carry himself off well in that whole debate. That said, he does posed some good questions. A lot of his questions, those of you that haven't watched it, he seems to get stuck up on some linguistic questions, which I think which was just dumb, if you're asking me, because it was stupid, because he repeatedly kind of hinged on this question of, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi, that Allah, He does salah. He keeps saying Allah does salah, so who is He doing salah to? And to be fair, Muhammad Hijab kind of answers that very well and says that, look, this doesn't mean he's praying to, it means he's kind of sending blessings upon. I think that's how I'm not sure if Muhammad Hijab did translate it like that, but that's how perhaps maybe that's I think is a good way to just translate it, the sending blessings upon. Now, this goes back, and Dr. Wood doesn't seem to leave this point alone. He says, no, yusalli is salah, and he brings it up time and time again. So I think that was just, I think it was quite dumb and pathetic on the part of Dr. Wood really to do that, because, if somebody's answered the question, you don't understand the Arabic language, just take it for now, and maybe you can research it further. So, that said, I think Dr. Wood did present some good kind of, when I say good, I mean some tough questions. But I think, luckily enough, he articulated them so pathetically that it didn't actually, he never managed to score a single punch with them. I think that the gist of what he was trying to get at, he had some very good questions and arguments that were kind of tough. But because he was, I don't know, apparently he's been doing this for decades, so I don't know why he was so poor at kind of articulating it. But he had certain questions that if I've understood them correctly, what he was trying to say was that you're mocking the Trinity, or you're ridiculing the Trinity, because it's incoherent, it's incomprehensible. This is the gist of, I think, what he was trying to say. He was trying to say, this is what I understood at a deeper level. I could be, either I'm giving him too much intelligence here, but I think this is what he was actually trying to say, is that you yourself in Islam have many incomprehensible truths that you seem to be okay with. So why are you struggling with this? MashaAllah. That's Dr. Wood calling in to say, yep, that's what I meant. So what he was trying to say, I think, was that, look, if this is an appeal to reason, if you're appealing to reason, that 3 = 1 is counter reason, irrational and makes no sense, then your debate on the Quran being uncreated is counter reason. Your debate on there being sifat of Allah that exist alongside Him and are not Him is unreasonable and counter reason. Your debate like this, there were several things that he points out to, but he articulates them so dumbly, like in such a dumb way, that luckily enough, I don't think most people got what he was saying, and therefore the whole argument just got pushed by the wayside. But these genuinely were some tough questions that he presented, in saying things like, oh, you're saying, for example, he did say one which Muhammad Hijab does respond to about the shafa'a, intercession. And how can the Quran intercede for you? Because if the Quran is God, then how can God intercede before God? That was his. To which Muhammad Hijab says, well, that's the actions, as in your recitation of the Quran, is as an action, and the reward is interceding. So I think that one he kind of answers, but so there were these points. I do think the difficult one of the uncreatedness of the Quran, Muhammad Hijab didn't answer. But generally, because they were presented so weakly, Muhammad Hijab does manage to just kind of destroy him very easily, because he's not presenting them very, they're not so solid. Whereas if he was, if that's what he was trying, because that's what I understood from him, that he was trying to say that, look, the Trinity is counter reason, but you guys yourselves accept so many things that are counter reason. Which would lead back to a point that I do stress on so many occasions, that it is so important, I feel, especially in this day and age, that Muslims, we do believe in the Quran to be in line with the voice of reason. Otherwise, these arguments don't actually stand, you see, because if somebody had articulated that a bit better, it would have been very difficult to answer to, because if you yourself are accepting, you'd asked about miracles, if you yourself are accepting miracles which make no sense, then the question would be that, well, 3 equating to 1 doesn't make sense either, but who cares? Since we're in, since the making sense card has kind of gone out the window, who cares anyway? It's an all or nothing. Either everything must make sense, or fine, it's just arbitrary. 10% doesn't make sense and 90% does, or 20% doesn't and 80% does. It's arbitrary. So I think these are some things worth thinking about. He does present, Dr. Wood says things about like anthropomorphic kind of beliefs that some Muslims have had, like they believed God was like he had body parts and stuff like this, and to be fair, there have been Muslims that have believed like that. But I understand that in the debate, you see, the whole purpose of a debate is to kind of win. There's no two ways about it. This whole thing that, like Imam Shafi'i allegedly once said, I debate somebody and I make dua that may the truth be manifest on his tongue, may he win. Well, either I'm not sure if Imam Shafi'i really said that, or if he did, maybe in his day and age. Nowadays it's all drama, theatre. It's all theatre, right? It's all about winning. So I understand that Muhammad Hijab, would, and it's, he would do what, fair enough, because the main point is to win. And, so he did dismiss a lot of these things and saying that there is no such thing. Muslims have never said stuff like this. But Muslims have said it, unfortunately. Not that we agree with them. I don't agree with those Muslims that say things like that God has, these kind of body parts or these kind of things. And but there have been, unfortunately, Muslims that have said things like that. So there was a bit of there were some occasions where he was saying things, Dr. Wood was putting objections and saying some Muslims have said this. And Muhammad Hijab did kind of just say, no, that's not true at all. Whereas in a few of those occasions, it was actually true, but it may not be true of all people. The other thing is that Muslim creed, you see, our Aqidah as well, like if you're going to take the Nicene Aqidah, our Aqidah too, if we're going to use formal creed, you see, this is why I'm kind of never really in favor of these kind of Aqidah things. I always make a distinction between Aqidah and Iman, that creed and faith. That the Prophet came to teach faith, not to teach creed. Because with creed, it's always institutionalized. And even the Muslim creed is like, at least 300 years after the Prophet. It's not like, at least 200 to 300 years after the Prophet. It's not like something that was emerged at the time of the Prophet. In fact, surprisingly, the Prophet taught very little things on what Muslims must believe about God. Except the very basic, like God is one, and things like that. But he didn't, today Muslims teach us creed. Oh, you must believe this, and God has these attributes, and these attributes are like this. That is actually very, I think, irrational, nonsensical, not based in the Quran and Sunnah. And it actually does lead to a contradiction, because many Muslims today do push this creed that Allah has sifat, He has attributes, the attributes are not Him, and they're not other than Him. So what on earth is that then? La laysat, what is it? La huwa wa la ghayru. That's the term they use in a lot of the creed books, that they are not God and they are not other than God. This is why Ibn Rushd, the Muslim philosopher, said, you guys must be drunk on something. Like, what on earth does this stuff even mean that you're pushing? So Muslims do, but the plus side is that, and I think Dr. Wood highlighted this, but it served as a strength, that despite the efforts of Muslim clergy to push this stuff, the common Muslims don't know about this stuff. So despite the fact that the clergy have tried hard in getting everybody institutionalized into creed, but alhamdulillah, the common Muslim doesn't really know this stuff and have probably never even heard of it. So when Dr. Wood or these kind of people are saying these things, it doesn't resonate with people. So because they're thinking, what on earth is he on about? So once again, it's easy to just dismiss. And, it was quite easy or not easy, but it was then Muhammad Hijab would then just destroy his points, because a lot of people wouldn't understand them anyway. So that is, but there were some genuine kind of like tough challenges he did present. I think like that you guys yourself need to then either be consistent in appealing to reason all the way, or you don't. And so I think that's overall moving on to the way they conducted it. I do think that it's undebatable. I mean, it's actually very clear. Muhammad Hijab himself says that, look, during this debate, I'm not going to show any respect to Dr. David Wood or whatever, David Wood. That's an interesting. You see, I don't know. I was in a bit of a dilemma about this, because on one hand, I could see that, because he justifies it, Muhammad Hijab does, and he says, look, this guy's just been a. Better watch my language now. He's just been. he's just been an idiot, and he's been a bigot towards Muslims. He's an Islamophobe. He has caused a lot of hatred against Muslims. He's caused attacks on Muslims. I mean, I don't know, but presumably that's true. And if that be true, you can understand on one hand where Muhammad Hijab was coming from, in the sense that he's thinking, well, you've kind of done us over for so long, I'm going to have a zero tolerance attitude to you. But and so hence he has so Muhammad Hijab is very kind of aggressive. He has an aggressive, I mean, not aggressive as in like, but it is, the demeanor is aggressive. I mean, you can't deny that it is aggressive. Like, it's a lot of, answer me, tell me, show me this today. You won't be able, it's a very kind of condescending and loud. It's very loud. I mean, I'm sure part of that may be because Muhammad Hijab is obviously used to generally with his debates, like he does, like in Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, whatever they do, probably shout and stuff like that. But that may be part of it. It may be part of the fact that he, like he said, look, I ain't going to show you respect because you've always been putting us down. So, to hell with you. But David Wood is kind of very reasonable from his behavior all the way through. He doesn't kind of get rude, generally speaking. He does one, two little kind of sneers and digs in between, where he kind of tries to crack a few jokes about Islam. But generally, he's kind of, he doesn't get equally aggressive. Like, he doesn't kind of say, well, whatever this. I don't know if he usually does. Once again, I haven't watched too many of his things, but in that debate. So the question was, that was the justification of Muhammad Hijab. On the other hand, it did make Muslims look kind of like the usual, like you get that meme with the, there's that guy who says 1920 and the guy's like, and then you've got like, then it moves on and then it says like 1955 and then working on a TV, and on this side you got the Maulvi kind of guy going, and then it says like 2018 and now they've got all this technology and the Maulvi is still like, You must have seen that meme. It's quite funny, but it did, on the other hand, it did show that, it did prove that, see, like Muslims, they're just aggressive, they're just disrespectful, they kind of shout, they like to kind of stamp the authority, it did give that, but I don't know, you see, when I watched it, I watched the whole thing and I thought about it, and I was in a bit of a dilemma, because I was thinking, well, I think Muhammad Hijab on that one was in a situation, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because I think the fact that he did it to teach him a lesson. Because unquestionably, he destroys and David Wood, and with that attitude, it just amplifies it, because you're constantly kind of shouting down and saying, well, go on then, answer this, don't you dare, like shut up, don't bring, I'm not sure if he says shut up, but he said, don't bring me, ask me, don't tell me, blah, blah, constantly. Now that magnifies your impact. So on one hand, he's put in his place, and undoubtedly he was. So I can imagine he must have felt like terrible. That might have added to why he was kind of shaky. So I could see that. On the other hand, you see, that's in a lot of the comments online, on a lot of the things on YouTube when I saw it, almost all of the non-Muslims used that point to kind of then detract from the win. To say, well, typical, shouting Muslims, just nothing better to do, just stamp the authority, be disrespectful, be rude. Why not kind of show it back? If he's being rude, why not kind of turn the other cheek and kill him with kindness, so to speak? Now I say, kindness. Well, Dr. Wood. I mean, you see, it's a tricky one, because I watched it and I have to say, on some parts, he is very kind of like, and then I suppose he's a very big person as well. I mean, so he must be almost about 7 foot or something, right? So you can imagine, obviously, in his presence, so he's just sitting not so far away from him, and then he's shouting, and it must have that impact. So I can see that this, on the other hand, I can see him saying that, look, you've been taking the mick out of Muslims for so long. Today I'm going to teach you a lesson that I'm going to, put the nails on the coffin that next time you sit in front of a Muslim. So I don't know how he should have behaved on that. But I do think that from the overall view, it was used as ammunition clearly. So I could see that point, but because it went all the way through, it made Muslims, it did give that thing. And then the other thing was in the crowd, Muslims, they started the whole takbir, Allahu Akbar, and then luckily nobody went. They're like, no, this is the Muslim side. Oh, it's a joke. But I think that didn't help really, because it showed this whole thing of like kind of just, Muslims kind of being rowdy and stuff like that. So that was some of my thoughts about the akhlaq characteristics. But I definitely do feel that this is in many ways a monumental kind of discussion. I do think if you haven't watched it, when you get time, do watch it. It will definitely go down. I think that David Wood will forever be embarrassed now. What was funny was in the YouTube comments, I read the YouTube comments, so many of them, not the whole thing, there's so many. But what was shocking is that the kind of supporters of David Wood were still trying to act like that he'd won. They were like, some of them were just saying about, hijab should have behaved better and stuff like this. But many of them were like, oh, excellent, you did amazing, you did this, you did this. And then, like, so many comments down, you'll get one comment saying, why are all the supporters acting like he won? So I think that was it was funny to read. But overall, so if any of the people watching this as well, including Muhammad Hijab and others, I think that there was an excellent performance of knowledge. That I have to say, from the biblical side of things. So, and that is, it's something really inspiring, and also a lesson that, if you are going to debate something or discuss it, you should have thorough knowledge. I don't know whether I read somewhere Muhammad Hijab even studied Hebrew for it. I don't, if that be the case, wow, I'm impressed. But so that is something that was well done. His own day and age, Ahmadiyya was the whole, that shouting and the whole, it kind of pushed us straight back into that era. So I think we do need to up our akhlaq game, definitely. And I think also one thing I would say is that we need to kind of, what we can learn from this debate is if we're going to be objective and true to ourselves, is that what we can't do is have irrational beliefs ourselves and then condemn other people for irrational beliefs. Like, we must be consistent. That's one thing that I would like to definitely take away from that, and I would encourage people to take that away, that we need to revisit some understandings we have. Because if we're saying things like, look, you know, this was done and laws of nature don't matter and this don't matter and none of these things matter, then 3 equals 1 doesn't matter. Because what's to say that God can't make himself be 3 manifestations apart from reason? And if you throw reason out the window, then nothing matters. It's like, what's to say? Well, you could say, well, 3 doesn't equal 1 according to mathematics. You say, yeah, but maybe God made an exception using his all-powerful power. So it becomes an absurd argument. I accept that, but it's absurd because you're not sticking to the voice of reason. So if we're going to stick to the voice of reason, we have to follow through in Islam. There's no point having it at that level, and then we start saying things like, you know, like somebody had sent me these clips of, let's drink camel urine, or let's do this, or, you know, or miracles happen in certain ways, and, you know, there is no laws of nature, or when God doesn't want them, and stuff like this. That, to me, is a confusing message. So that's all I would like to say on that debate, inshallah. So I hope that, but well done, definitely, for having the debate, I think. Muhammad Hijab, I think that was well done. I have